The morning train from Philadelphia to Washington hummed steadily through the mist. It was the 6:20 Express, filled with tired commuters clutching coffee cups and newspapers. No one expected history to unfold in car number 3 that day. Then it began, a harsh voice cutting through the calm. "Get your hands off that seat. You don't belong up here with decent people." Heads turned. At the center of the commotion stood Officer Blake, a uniformed transit cop with a glare sharp enough to cut glass. He towered over a calm, older black man seated in first class. The man wore a clean navy suit and a neatly pressed coat adorned with a few understated medals. "My ticket's right here," the man said softly, his tone respectful yet unshaken. "I belong exactly where I paid to be." Blake snatched the ticket from his hand, crumpled it, and threw it to the floor. "Sure you do," he sneered. "And I suppose you got those medals for being a hero, too?" The passenger, Samuel Reed, leaned back, his eyes steady. "I didn't ask for recognition, officer, just respect." But Blake wasn't listening. He reached forward, yanking at one of the medals. "Probably bought this junk online. Men like you love pretending." The insult echoed through the carriage. A teenage girl gasped, lowering her phone as she began to record. A businessman whispered to his seatmate, "Is this really happening?" Samuel didn't flinch. His patience was a calm before a storm no one saw coming. The train slowed as it approached Union Station, the morning sun spilling across the polished floors of the platform. The doors slid open. Heavy boots stepped aboard, an authoritative rhythm that instantly shifted the energy. Captain Daniel Reed, the head of transit enforcement, entered with a clipboard in hand. He scanned the car, prepared for a routine inspection, until his eyes landed on Samuel. The clipboard slipped from his fingers. Papers scattered across the aisle. His face turned pale. His voice cracked. "Dad?" Gasps rippled through the car. Officer Blake froze mid-motion, his hand still gripping Samuel's medal. The silence was deafening. Passengers stared between the officer and his captain, disbelief painted on every face. "Captain, this can't be real," Blake stammered, stepping back. "This man, he's lying. He said he's some veteran or something, but—" "Finish that sentence," Captain Reed said, his tone suddenly cold. He stared at the man in the seat, his father, a man he hadn't seen in 25 years. Samuel stood slowly. His posture was straight, disciplined, unmistakably military. "Hello, Daniel," he said quietly. The words carried both warmth and pain. Phones rose again. Cameras flashed. A wave of whispers spread. "The captain's dead?" "He's a veteran?" That cop's finished. Officer Blake swallowed hard, the realization dawning on him far too late. He had mocked a decorated veteran. He had insulted the father of his own commanding officer. And worse, he had no idea who Samuel Reed truly was. Blake's voice quivered. "Captain, I swear I was just doing my job. He looked suspicious sitting in first class." "Suspicious?" Captain Reed's voice thundered through the train car. "My father looked suspicious because he sat in a seat he paid for." Samuel raised a hand gently. "Daniel, it's all right." The officer was only following his training. The way he said training made the young officer's stomach twist. "Dad, what are you talking about? Where have you been?" Daniel's voice softened, disbelief giving way to emotion. "We were told you died in Afghanistan. Mom, she said you never came home." "I couldn't," Samuel replied, pulling a leather wallet from his coat. He unfolded an identification badge, the gold seal of the Department of Justice gleaming under the fluorescent light. "I had to disappear for my work. Civil Rights Division. Federal investigator." The entire train car went silent. Blake stepped back, his face drained of color. You're a federal agent?" "That's right, Officer Blake, badge number 5111, Samuel said evenly. "And as of this morning, you've become part of an ongoing investigation into racial discrimination in public transportation." The young officer blinked, sweat beading on his forehead. "What investigation?" "This one," Samuel said simply. "Congratulations, officer. You just became the case study." The murmurs turned into quiet outrage among passengers. An elderly woman whispered, "Good for him." Blake stuttered, "Sir, I didn't know. I didn't know who you were." Samuel's expression was calm but cutting. "Would it have mattered? Would you have treated me differently if you did?" No one spoke. The question hung heavy in the air. Then the radio on Blake's shoulder crackled to life. "Unit 511, status check. Back up en route. The passenger's eyes widened. Back up for what? Blake's trembling hand hovered over the radio. This is 511. I have a situation with a hostile suspect claiming to be federal law enforcement. Don't you dare, Captain Reed snapped. Officer Blake, stand down. But panic had already taken over. Blake's voice cracked as he repeated, requesting immediate assistance. Samuel shook his head slowly. You just made a federal mistake, son. His calm presence felt like gravity itself and unshakable, commanding. Every eye in the car was on him now. He picked up the crumpled ticket from the floor, smoothed it out, and looked at Blake. In your professional opinion, officer, what crime have I committed today? I thought you looked suspicious, Blake muttered. Suspicious, Samuel repeated softly. You mean I looked like someone who didn't belong? He let the words sink in. Tell me, officer, what does someone who belongs look like to you? The question burned through the silence. No one dared breathe, and just like that, the power in the room shifted. The man who had been humiliated was now in complete control. Samuel's calm stare cut deeper than any weapon. Blake's hand shook over his radio as if the device might save him. Around them, the train car felt frozen, every breath suspended in anticipation. Captain Reed's voice dropped low, sharp enough to slice the air. Officer Blake, you will not call for backup again. Do you understand me? Blake's throat tightened. Sir, you were just what? Daniel's words came out like thunder. Just harassing a man who showed you a valid ticket? Just humiliating a veteran in front of witnesses? Samuel placed a hand gently on his son's arm. Daniel, it's all right. Let the young man speak. He's still learning what integrity means. That quiet composure made Blake's stomach churn. His arrogance from moments ago was gone, replaced by trembling confusion. I didn't mean any harm. I was following what I was taught. We're supposed to watch for people who look out of place and out of place? Samuel repeated the words slow and dangerous. Tell me, officer, out of place where? In America? A murmur swept through the train car. An older white woman whispered, Bless that man, while a young soldier in uniform straightened in his seat with pride. Captain Reed stepped between them. Dad, how long have you been doing this work? 9 years, Samuel replied. Since the day the government asked me to go undercover after my service. I've been investigating patterns of racial profiling in public transportation ever since. He paused, eyes locked on Blake. And today, I found exactly what I was looking for. Blake stumbled backward. You can't set people up like that. That's entrapment. No, Samuel said softly. Entrapment means I forced you to act, but you made your own choices. You saw my skin color and decided I didn't belong here. The young officer's radio crackled again. Unit 511 backup approaching platform. Confirm situation. Captain Reed's jaw clenched. Blake, do not respond to that call. But fear had fully taken control. They have to know the truth. Blake's voice rose. He's not who he says he is. He's pretending to be. Samuel reached into his coat pocket and revealed a second phone, a secure black device with a federal seal etched into the back. He dialed calmly. Deputy Director Carter, this is Investigator Reed. Situation confirmed. Requesting contact with the Transit Division's commanding officer. Civil rights breach in progress. Blake's jaw dropped. You're really making that call? Samuel spoke into the phone without looking at him. Yes, ma'am. I'm safe. Local officer has made physical contact and is escalating without cause. Multiple witnesses present. He ended the call and slid the device away. Federal intervention will arrive shortly. The officer's face went ghost white. This can't be happening. Oh, it's happening, Captain Reed said quietly. And you brought it on yourself, passengers whispered among themselves. A mother hugged her child closer. A young woman whispered, he's so calm, like he's done this 1,000 times. Blake's voice cracked again. You don't get it. I was trained to keep order. You don't know what it's like out there. People lie, fake IDs, sneak into first class. And your training told you to judge someone's worth by their skin? Samuel's voice stayed calm but carried a weight that filled every inch of the car, because that's what you did. You saw me as a threat when I was simply reading case files. The car went still again. Then the overhead announcement broke the silence. Union Station. Final stop. The train slowed, screeching softly against the rails, but no one moved. Samuel adjusted his jacket, his medals glinting under the fluorescent light. Perfect timing, he murmured. Your backup is about to arrive. Let's see how you explain this to them." Moments later, the doors slid open. 3 transit officers stormed in, weapons at the ready. "Officer Blake, where's the suspect?" Blake pointed frantically at Samuel. "Right there. He's impersonating federal law enforcement. He's dangerous," the lead officer frowned. "That man? He's sitting calmly with his paperwork." Blake's voice pitched higher. "He's pretending. Claims to be some investigator from the Department of Justice. Says he's the captain's father, some fake veteran story." Captain Reed stepped forward. "Stand down. That man is Special Investigator Samuel Reed, Civil Rights Division, United States Department of Justice. And yes, he's my father." The 3 officers exchanged uneasy glances. The lead one, Sergeant Walters, hesitated before asking, "Sir, can we verify that?" Samuel stood, extending his ID. The badge shimmered with official holographic markings. "You can call the DOJ verification line. Code 47A, Section 3, they'll confirm." Walters studied the ID for a long moment, then nodded. "This looks genuine," Blake shouted. "It's fake!" "He's tricking all of you." Captain Reed's patience snapped. "Enough. You assaulted a veteran, disrespected your superior's father, and now you're calling a federal investigator a liar?" Samuel's expression didn't change. "Officer Blake, you're not under arrest yet, but your actions are now part of a federal civil rights investigation. Every word you say can be used as evidence." Walters looked at him in disbelief. "Evidence? You recorded this?" Samuel held up a small device. "From the moment I boarded. It's part of my job to document discriminatory conduct, and today's footage will be thoroughly reviewed." The officers' faces hardened. Blake went pale. "You recorded me?" "Yes," Samuel said simply. "Every word, every insult, every choice. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Blake's voice broke into a shrill plea. "This isn't fair. He set me up." "You set yourself up," Samuel replied. "You judged before knowing, acted before thinking, and condemned before listening. That's not policing. That's prejudice." The young officer's knees seemed to buckle. "I didn't mean—" Samuel cut him off quietly. "Meaning doesn't erase harm. Only accountability does." The car was silent except for the rhythmic click of the train's cooling metal. Then the lead officer's radio chirped. "All units, FBI field office has requested immediate preservation of all body camera footage from Unit 511's incident." Blake froze. "The FBI?" Samuel nodded. "That's right. The Bureau's involved now." The officer's breathing quickened. "Why would the FBI care about this?" "Because," Samuel said, "you didn't just insult a man. You violated federal civil rights under the color of law, and that, Officer Blake, is a felony." His words hit like a gavel. At that exact moment, heavy boots sounded again on the platform. The train doors opened one more time. Federal agents in dark suits entered, badges glinting under the lights. The woman in front spoke clearly, her tone leaving no room for doubt. "Special Agent Rivera, FBI Civil Rights Division. We're here for the suspect in case file 932C. Blake exhaled in relief. "Thank God, finally someone who gets it. That's the man. He's the fraud." He pointed straight at Samuel. Agent Rivera turned her gaze toward him. "Fraud?" She studied Samuel for a second, then nodded respectfully. "Investigator Reed, I take it this is the individual?" Samuel's expression remained calm. "Yes, ma'am. Officer Blake, Unit 511. He's the subject of our ongoing field assessment. Conduct met all markers of racial bias escalation." Agent Rivera's tone chilled. "Understood." She faced Blake. "Officer, you are being detained under suspicion of federal civil rights violations. Please step forward." Blake stumbled backward. No, you don't understand."
"He tricked me."
"You tricked yourself," Captain Reed said quietly. "Now face the consequences." As the agents cuffed Blake, the murmurs in the car turned to applause from the passengers. Someone whispered, "Finally." Another voice said softly, "Justice looks like this." But Samuel's eyes were distant, already somewhere far beyond this train car. He knew this was only the beginning. The officer's actions were a symptom of something deeper, something that stretched across departments and states, and he intended to expose every inch of it. The platform outside was chaos, flashing lights and radio chatter slicing through the heavy morning air. Officers scrambled for explanations, but none came. The crowd that had once been passengers now stood as witnesses, phones raised high. Every second was being streamed across the internet, and the truth could no longer hide in silence. Inside the car, Samuel stood tall as the agents led Officer Blake toward the exit. Blake twisted in their grip, shouting, "You can't arrest me for doing my job. I was protecting people. He's twisting this." Samuel watched him with the calmness of a man who had seen worse storms. "Protecting people from what, officer? From my presence? From my right to sit in a seat I paid for?" Blake's voice faltered, his words collapsing under their own weakness. "You don't understand how we're trained. You see someone who doesn't fit and you check. That's procedure. Procedure without conscience is just cruelty with a badge," Samuel said. Captain Reed turned toward his father, a mix of awe and guilt clouding his face. "Dad, this isn't just about him, is it?" Samuel's eyes softened for a moment. "No, son. It never is. It's about the system that lets men like him believe they're right." The train emptied slowly, the chatter fading as agents secured evidence. A few passengers stopped to shake Samuel's hand, whispering thanks or simple words of admiration. The teenage girl who had recorded everything approached him timidly. "Sir, the video's already gone viral." "Everyone's seeing this," Samuel nodded. "Good. Let them see what justice looks like when it starts small." The agents guided Blake off the train, his protests echoing faintly. But for Samuel, the day was far from over. He gathered his files, his voice low as he turned to Daniel. "We're going to need everything: body cam footage, incident logs, complaint histories. This one case may open 100 others." By afternoon, the story had already exploded across every screen. "Transit officer arrested after harassing black veteran" blared across headlines. Hashtags trended, comment sections filled with outrage. But inside the Federal Justice Building in Washington, the energy was focused and cold. A conference room buzzed with senior investigators and analysts. Agent Rivera stood at the head of the table. "This case isn't isolated," she said. "We've uncovered 32 similar complaints over the past 2 years across 3 different rail systems. The same officers rotate through them. The same tactics, the same victims." Samuel unfolded a stack of documents, maps dotted with red pins. "It's a network," he said, "coordinated through security contracts and departmental partnerships. The companies call it demographic vigilance. I call it targeted discrimination." Deputy Director Carter leaned forward. "How deep does it go?" Samuel's tone darkened. "Deeper than we thought. They're incentivized. Officers get bonuses for interventions that meet their quotas. Those quotas just happen to focus on minority passengers, veterans, and the elderly." The room went silent. Every person there could feel the weight of it. Rivera broke the stillness. "We've confirmed at least 4 supervisors approving reports with falsified language, phrases like unusual demeanor or did not fit passenger profile." "And how many were punished?" Carter asked. Samuel glanced down at his notes. "None," the deputy director exhaled slowly. "All right. Then it's time for a full task force. Civil rights, federal transport oversight, DOJ, and the FBI." She turned to Samuel. "You lead it." He nodded once. "We start immediately." That night, Samuel sat in his office, the glow of city lights cutting across his desk. Piles of files surrounded him. Victim letters, transcripts, reports buried under bureaucracy. He ran a hand across his face, feeling every year of sacrifice pressing against him. A knock at the door broke the quiet. Daniel stepped in, still in uniform. "They want me to testify at the internal hearing. About everything." Samuel looked up. "Then tell the truth, son. Every word of it. Because sunlight is the only thing corruption fears." Daniel hesitated. "Dad, all those years I thought you were gone. Mom never told me you were alive. I joined the force to honor you." Samuel's eyes softened. "You did. By staying honest in a world that rewards silence." He stood, placing a steady hand on Daniel's shoulder. "But the truth will cost you, son. You'll lose friends, maybe your rank, but you'll keep something much greater." "What's that?" Daniel asked. "Your soul." The next week, the hearings began. Cameras lined the marble hallways of the National Civil Rights Tribunal. Reporters swarmed outside. Officer Blake, now in custody, entered wearing a gray suit instead of a uniform. His lawyer whispered in his ear, but his face looked hollow, lost. Samuel sat across from him, calm and prepared. The prosecutor rose first. Mr. Blake, during your encounter with Special Investigator Reed, did you use racially charged language? Blake swallowed. I don't remember. Did you crumple his ticket? Maybe, but did you call him boy? The word hung in the air like a curse. Blake's voice cracked. I was angry. He disrespected me. The prosecutor's tone sharpened. And that justified public humiliation? Physical contact? False radio reports? No, Blake shouted. I was trained that way. We were told to be aggressive with passengers who didn't fit the image of first class. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Samuel leaned forward slightly. There it is, he said quietly. He said the word, image. The prosecutor turned toward him. Would you care to elaborate, Investigator Reed? Samuel stood. The officer's not lying. That's exactly what they're taught, to protect an image of comfort for certain passengers, and to treat others as intruders in spaces they paid to enter. It's a modern segregation system disguised as security policy. Gasps filled the courtroom. Even the judge looked shaken. And this isn't just one man's fault, Samuel continued. It's written into the contracts, encouraged by management, reinforced by silence. The prosecutor nodded slowly. And how many complaints have you found in connection with this so-called image policy? Over 300 documented in the past 24 months, Samuel said, spread across 5 states and multiple agencies. The judge's gavel struck the desk. Then this court will expand the investigation immediately. Blake lowered his head, tears streaking his face. I didn't know it was this deep, he whispered. Samuel looked at him, not with triumph, but with quiet sadness. That's the problem. None of you wanted to know. As the hearing adjourned, news alerts exploded across the country. Federal investigation expands, civil rights violations in public transport exposed. That night, Samuel and Daniel stood outside the courthouse, facing the swarm of cameras. A reporter called out, Mr. Reed, is this the end of the story? Samuel met her eyes. No, it's the beginning of accountability. The investigation swept through the country like a storm that no one could stop. In a matter of weeks, dozens of officers, supervisors, and executives found themselves facing subpoenas. What started with one racist encounter on a morning train had become a national reckoning. Samuel worked 16-hour days, buried under files that seemed endless. He read report after report, complaints ignored, footage deleted, statements rewritten. Each document told the same story in a different city, the same language, the same excuses. Passenger looked suspicious. Did not match expected class profile. Appeared nervous. He marked everyone in red. Patterns, he muttered. Always the same patterns. Agent Rivera entered his office carrying a folder marked confidential. We've traced the funding channels, she said. It's worse than we thought. Samuel looked up, weary but alert. How bad? The rail companies have been paying off-duty police to enhance security. It's written as a bonus program, but the memos describe it as protecting brand reputation. They targeted specific demographics that made other passengers uncomfortable. Samuel closed his eyes, exhaling slowly. They turned prejudice into a business model. Across town, Captain Daniel Reed sat in a hearing room under harsh lights. A panel of federal inspectors questioned him about his department's role. One of them asked coldly, Captain, are you aware that several of your predecessors buried civil rights complaints? Daniel nodded. I am now, but I swear none of those cases ever crossed my desk. They were intercepted before they reached command review. And do you know by whom? Yes, Daniel said quietly. By Chief Hamilton. The name hung heavy in the air. The inspector looked down at his notes. Chief Hamilton is already in custody. He's cooperating. Daniel's voice hardened. He should. He taught those officers to treat suspicion as policy. He told them what kind of people didn't belong in first class. He built this system. The inspector's pen paused. And yet, Captain, you led the same division for 5 years. Daniel felt the accusation cut deep. I led it, yes, but I didn't see it for what it was. I believed the system was working. I was wrong. Back at headquarters, Samuel studied a photo wall filled with connected faces and red string lines. Officers, executives, contractors, lobbyists, an entire chain of complicity that reached beyond the trains. Agent Rivera pointed to a section at the top. The CEO of Northern Rail Corporation, Anthony Carver. He approved every one of those contracts. His signature is on the documents that established the demographic screening policy. Samuel stared at the name. Get him. Every email, every memo. No immunity deals. By morning, federal agents raided Carver's glass-walled office in Philadelphia. News cameras caught everything. Reporters shouted questions as the executive was led away in handcuffs, his expensive suit rumpled, his face pale. That night, the nation erupted. Talk shows debated, newspapers ran special editions, and millions watched clips of the arrest on repeat. Some called Samuel a hero. Others called him dangerous. Daniel found his father in his office, still working as midnight crept past. They're calling it the Reed reforms already, Daniel said with a small smile. Samuel didn't look up from his files. Words mean nothing without action. You've already changed everything. Samuel's eyes flicked up, tired but sharp. Not yet. Change isn't a speech, Daniel. It's a habit. And habits take time to rebuild. He leaned back, staring at the city skyline beyond the window. They thought they could bury justice under paperwork, but the truth always finds a way to breathe. Days later, inside a crowded congressional chamber, Samuel stood before the Judiciary Committee. The walls buzzed with anticipation. Cameras rolled as he began. Ladies and gentlemen, this investigation uncovered over 500 verified cases of discriminatory enforcement across the Northeastern Corridor. It is not an accident. It is design. The committee chair leaned forward. And who designed it, Investigator Reed? Samuel's tone stayed level. A culture that rewards suspicion more than service, that teaches officers to fear difference rather than protect it. Do you believe this culture can be changed? Samuel paused. Yes, but not by slogans, by law. We need national oversight, federal accountability, real consequences. The room was silent. His words carried the weight of truth stripped of anger, spoken from experience rather than theory. After the session, a reporter caught him outside the building. Mr. Reed, people are calling you a symbol of justice. How do you feel about that? He smiled faintly. Symbols don't fix systems. People do. The question is whether we have enough honest ones left to finish the job. Meanwhile, in a high-security holding cell, Officer Blake sat hunched over a metal table. His lawyer, a gray-haired man named Frank Dalton, sighed heavily. They're offering a deal. 7 years, full cooperation, testify against your department and the company executives. Blake's voice was hollow. 7 years? My career's gone. My wife filed for divorce, my pension's gone, what's the point? Dalton looked at him grimly. The point is survival. Or you can keep pretending you were right and spend 20 years thinking about it in prison. Blake's eyes filled with tears. I thought I was protecting people. That's what they told us. No, Dalton said quietly. They told you to protect profits. Word of the plea deal leaked within hours. Other officers followed, one after another, trading secrets for lighter sentences. The floodgates opened. Emails surfaced. Training slides. Internal memos stamped confidential. The picture was undeniable. Systematic discrimination disguised as security strategy. The following month, the Justice Department held a press conference. Rows of reporters filled the room, cameras flashing. Agent Rivera spoke first. After months of investigation, we confirmed that the program known as demographic vigilance has been dismantled. 12 officers, 4 supervisors, and multiple executives face federal charges under Title 18, Section 242. Then she stepped aside. Samuel approached the podium. He looked out over the crowd. This case began with one man's arrogance and ended with a nation's reflection. We cannot call ourselves free if dignity depends on a ticket class or a skin color. The applause that followed was quiet at first, then grew until it filled the room. Samuel's gaze drifted to the back where Daniel stood proud but solemn. Later, in a dim hallway, Daniel caught up to him. "You did it?" Samuel shook his head. "No, son, we did it. Every person who refused to stay silent did it. Justice isn't one man's victory. It's a collective decision." As they walked out together into the night, neither of them noticed the news cameras still rolling. Across the country, policy shifts began. Companies rewrote training manuals. Civil rights divisions expanded. New officers learned that authority without empathy is the fastest path to corruption. But while others celebrated, Samuel's instincts stayed sharp. He had seen too many systems fall back into old habits. One evening, as he sorted through the last of the reports, he noticed something: a cluster of names linked to rural counties in the South. Complaints dismissed. Cases quietly closed. Daniel entered the office, loosening his tie. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Samuel handed him the file. "These towns aren't following the new regulations. The same officers keep transferring between departments. Different badges, same behavior." Daniel frowned. "You think it's connected?" "I think," Samuel said slowly, "we just uncovered the next chapter." The night stretched long over the city, thunder rolling faintly in the distance. Samuel sat at his desk, the new file open under a single desk lamp. Dozens of pages, reports from small counties most people had never heard of. Each complaint read the same: harassment during bus searches, unlawful ticket checks, intimidation at train depots. And every time the name of the same handful of officers appeared, shuffled from one rural department to another. He called Daniel in without looking up. "They're moving people," he said. "The ones who should have been fired are being quietly rehired elsewhere. Same tactics, new uniforms." Daniel rubbed the back of his neck. "We cleaned house, Dad. How can this still be happening?" Samuel flipped a page. "Because corruption doesn't disappear when you fire a few men, it adapts. It hides in the cracks of bureaucracy." He pushed the file toward his son. "They're calling themselves Operation Fortress. It's a network of sheriffs and ex-officers refusing to implement federal reforms. They're sharing strategies to avoid oversight." Daniel scanned the documents, disbelief turning into anger. "They're actually organizing against the new civil rights protocols?" Samuel nodded grimly. "And they're using the same rhetoric that's always fueled oppression: state rights, local control, federal interference. They think justice is optional depending on the zip code." A week later, Samuel and Daniel flew to Alabama, where several of the counties named in the report operated under the same joint training program. The airport was small, surrounded by farmland, but as soon as they arrived, Samuel felt the tension. Local deputies watched them from behind mirrored sunglasses. The next morning, they attended a meeting with a county sheriff named Preston Hale. The man's handshake was stiff, his smile thin. "Federal investigators, huh? Thought your kind was done poking around here after that train mess up north?" Samuel sat across from him. "We're not poking around, Sheriff. We're ensuring the law is respected equally." Hale leaned back in his chair. "We don't need Washington telling us how to treat our citizens." Samuel's eyes stayed steady. "Then perhaps you shouldn't treat some as less than citizens." The room went still. Hale's deputy shifted uncomfortably. When they left the meeting, Daniel exhaled sharply. He didn't even try to hide it. "They never do," Samuel said. "That's how arrogance works. It feels safe until accountability walks in the door." Later that night, Samuel sat in the hotel room reviewing data from the task force. "We've confirmed 47 officers connected to this network," Daniel read aloud. "They share intelligence, coordinate enforcement patterns, and even coach new recruits on how to spot trouble. It's discrimination rebranded as community policing." Samuel looked up from the papers. "They're trying to rebuild what we dismantled. But this time we won't just expose them, we'll dismantle the roots." Days passed in a blur of interviews and subpoenas. Witnesses came forward, some trembling, some angry, all telling the same story. Roadside stops that never should have happened, threats hidden behind polite tones, arrests justified by invented suspicion. Samuel's patience hardened into resolve. Every page, every testimony added to a mosaic of systemic betrayal. He knew the stakes were bigger than one case. This was about the soul of law enforcement itself. Weeks later, they presented their findings in Washington. The conference room was filled with federal leaders, journalists, and advocates. Daniel stood beside his father as Samuel spoke. "What we've uncovered is not new," he began. "It is the shadow of an old disease, one that shifts shape every time we expose it." The names change, the uniforms change, but the intent remains the same, to decide who deserves respect and who does not. He paused, looking around the room. Justice is not a destination. It's a constant pursuit. If we stop chasing it, injustice catches up. The applause rose like a wave. For the first time in years, Samuel let himself smile. But he knew the fight wasn't finished. Months later, he boarded a quiet evening train heading home, the same route where everything had begun. As the countryside rolled past the window, he felt the weight of memory. The anger, the humiliation, the moment his dignity had been tested. And the long, relentless climb toward reform that followed. Across from him, a young black cadet in a crisp academy uniform sat reading a manual on federal ethics. He looked up nervously and nodded. "Sir, I just wanted to say, your case is part of our training now. They call it the Reed Standard. It's about doing the right thing even when no one's watching." Samuel smiled softly. Then maybe we're finally moving in the right direction. When he arrived at the station, Daniel was waiting. "You're late," he teased. "Justice doesn't run on a schedule," Samuel replied with a chuckle. They walked side by side through the terminal, past travelers of every background and color moving freely through the same doors once shadowed by prejudice. "Do you think it'll last this time?" Daniel asked quietly. Samuel's gaze stayed on the crowd. "It will last as long as people keep caring. Equality isn't permanent, son. It's a responsibility we renew every day." He stopped near the platform, looking out at the departing trains. "There will always be another fight, another place where dignity is denied. And when that happens, someone will have to stand up again." Daniel nodded. "Then we'll be ready." Samuel turned to him, the faintest smile breaking the lines of his face. "That's all I ever wanted." The whistle of a departing train filled the air. As it faded into the night, the words he had lived by echoed in his mind. Justice delayed is dignity denied. But when it finally arrives, it changes everything. And for the first time in decades, Samuel Reed felt peace, not because the battle was over, but because he had passed the torch to hands strong enough to carry it forward. The next morning brought the kind of light that makes everything look cleaner than it really is. The clouds above the Capitol were soft and golden, but beneath them the air inside the Federal Justice Building carried a weight no sunrise could lift. Samuel and Daniel sat in a briefing room lined with folders, hundreds of them, each marked pending review. An assistant entered quietly. "Sir, the task force reports are in. Multiple states are pushing back against implementation. Sheriffs in Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi are refusing to comply. Some are calling it a stand for freedom." Daniel frowned. "Freedom?" "They're twisting the word again." Samuel's voice was low, deliberate. That word has always been their shield. They claim freedom, but what they mean is the freedom to discriminate without consequence. He opened one of the files, its pages full of transcripts from county radio channels and meeting notes. Some messages were blunt, others coded. "Keep outsiders off our soil. Maintain traditional enforcement. Don't let DC dictate our policing." Each phrase was a thread in the same old fabric. Later that day, they flew south again, this time to Jackson County, Mississippi, where Operation Fortress was strongest. The air was thick with heat. The courthouse steps lined with men in uniform who watched the Reeds approach like strangers trespassing on sacred ground. Inside, Sheriff Hale's replacement, a younger man named Morgan Price, waited behind a desk. His tone was practiced politeness wrapped around hostility. "We've been cooperating as required, Investigator Reed. We've got nothing to hide." Samuel set a folder on the desk. "Then you won't mind explaining these." He slid out photos of body camera stills, citizens stopped without cause, tickets torn up, veterans questioned about their service. Price's jaw tightened. Those incidents were handled locally. "Locally," Samuel repeated, meaning no oversight, meaning no accountability. Price leaned forward, meaning we know our own community better than Washington ever will. Daniel stepped forward, voice hard. "You don't know your community if you keep treating half of it like suspects." The tension in the room snapped like dry wire. Deputies shifted, hands close to holsters. Samuel's calm never broke. "If you were confident in your methods, Sheriff, you wouldn't fear documentation. You'd welcome it." Price forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "We'll see what the courts say." They left the courthouse in silence. Outside, protesters had gathered, half cheering for the reforms, half waving signs that read "Protect Local Authority." Daniel glanced at his father. "They're not scared, Dad. They're angry." "They're always angry when the old order starts to crumble," Samuel said. "But anger burns itself out. Justice doesn't." Weeks passed. Investigations deepened. Warrants expanded. The pushback grew louder, but so did the support. Civil rights groups, veterans associations, church coalitions, all began to rally behind the reforms Samuel had ignited. The country was splitting open, but for the first time in years, light was pouring through the cracks. Then came the attack. One night, as Samuel and Daniel prepared a report for Congress, an explosion ripped through the parking garage below the Justice Building. The blast shattered windows and set off alarms across the city. Smoke filled the corridors and chaos erupted. They were rushed to safety, but the message was clear. Someone wanted the investigation to stop. When the fire was contained, investigators found a note on a piece of scorched metal near the blast site. 4 words painted in crude black letters: "You can't police us." Daniel's hand shook as he read it. "They're terrorists now." "They always were," Samuel said quietly. "They just stopped pretending." The next day, he stood before national cameras once more. His voice was steady, but his eyes burned with conviction. "Those who fight equality have declared themselves enemies of the Constitution. They think intimidation will win. But justice does not negotiate with fear." The country listened, and this time it listened differently. In the following months, Congress passed emergency measures expanding federal oversight of all law enforcement training programs. The Department of Justice created a permanent task force, the Reed Division, focused entirely on civil rights enforcement and policing. The resistance network collapsed under pressure. One by one, sheriffs resigned. Officers turned on each other, and truth bled out in confessions and leaked recordings. The final case to close the circle came in the form of an arrest warrant for the man who had organized the bombing. Former Chief Hamilton, directing from prison through intermediaries. He was brought to trial in leg chains, still unrepentant. As the verdict was read, guilty on all counts, Samuel watched from the back of the courtroom, silent. He felt no triumph, only relief that no one else would die because of arrogance dressed as duty. Months later, he returned to the train line where it all began. The same 620 route hummed along the tracks, now under federal protection. He took his old seat in car 3. Across from him, a mother and child boarded. The little girl smiled at him, offering half a cookie. "Thank you," Samuel said, taking it. "You're very kind." "My mom says we should always be kind," the girl replied brightly. "She says it makes the world better." Samuel looked out the window, the countryside rushing past. "Your mother is right." When the train reached Union Station, he stepped off into the morning light. Daniel was waiting, no longer in his captain's uniform, but in a federal badge like his father's. "You ready for the next chapter?" Daniel asked. Samuel nodded slowly. "Always." They walked side by side through the station, 2 generations bound by justice, their reflections merging in the polished marble floor. As the crowds moved around them, different faces, different colors, all traveling the same path, Samuel felt something he hadn't in years. Not victory, not peace, continuity. Because justice, he realized, was never a moment. It was motion. And as long as the trains kept running, so would the fight to keep them fair.